Hey, what's going on, everyone? And welcome back to the Random Guy Podcast. I'm Steggy, and today I have a very special video, as you could probably see here. I have my webcam turned on, but it's not on me. It's at my playmat here, which is absolutely gorgeous. I really like this playmat. I got it on Amazon. And the reason why I have this here is because I think I figured out how to play the Disney Lorcana card game. Based on everything we've seen so far, and after watching a few other Disney Lorcana content creators last night, I think that I figured out how to play. I'm going to link down my biggest inspiration from last night. I watched this new channel called the Lorcana Twins, and something they said resonated in me, and I think I just got a flood of just inspiration. I went with it, and I think I figured this out. So let me just demonstrate, because the reason why I have this webcam on is I wanted to show how I think the game is going to be played, and I think it's going to be much better than me just talking about it. So, here's what I think you do. Here's how I think you play Disney Lorcana. On your first turn, you just draw a card. And I'm going to be using Duel Masters cards here as my kind of demonstration. It doesn't really matter too much. But someone who did work on Duel Masters is currently designing Disney Lorcana, so there could be some merit there. Now, for the intent and purposes of this video, the resource system doesn't really matter. It's still coming into play. How, like, the effects of what I'm doing still happen regardless of the resource system. But I have an interesting new take on what I think the resource system is. Not necessarily a new take, but more evidence or something. I think what you do is that you can draw your card, and in Duel Masters had no resource system. You just flipped your card over like this. So here's your card. It would look like this normally, but you could flip it over and it had this one. You take this, you put it down here. I have one red resource, and you can do that with like all other colors. Here's a green one. Boom. And you had some cards that would put the top card of your deck, say this guy, says when this creature attacks, you can take the top card of your deck, you'd flip it over, put it in your resource. So that was kind of like your resource generation. You could go faster. But what I think you do for Disney Lorcana is you take your card and you flip it over to show the back, and you put it down. That's what I think you do. Now, if you're, if the cards aren't sleeved, you can see that, like, I'll put it here on the screen. You can see the back of the card has this really nice symbol, and I bet that symbol is kind of meant to represent the resource. But if you do have your cards sleeved, or if they're not see-through or whatever, it's probably not a big deal. I don't think it's going to matter, but you just put that card down here. So on your first turn, let's say you play one resource, and then I use that resource, you expend it, and I'm going to play a card. And I'm going to play this guy right here. We can say that this is Olaf. For all intents and purposes, this is Olaf. Now, Olaf can't act on his first turn. He has summoning sickness. His ink needs to dry. So he's just going to hang out here. So your opponent's turn, your opponent's going to do the same thing. They're going to play their resource, and they're also going to play an Olaf. And it's important, that it's Olaf. So on my next turn, I get my resource, and say I draw a card here. And I'm going to put a second card down here in my resource pool. So now I have two of them. And I decide to my two that I'm going to play this card. So I have a 2 cost. So it could be like Aladdin. So say it's my 2 for a 2/2. I just played Aladdin. And I have Olaf. So I'm playing, Amethyst. And, Emerald. Amethyst and Emerald. This is weird because I was like, Amber? No, these are red. So, what'd you say? I have purple and green, okay? Purple and green. So now, the important thing. I have a choice to do with this card. I can either, I can have it sit here and do nothing. Or, I can have it challenge one of my opponent's characters. Or, I could go out and get some lore. However, I cannot challenge an opponent's character unless it is exerted. None of my opponent's characters are exerted. Well, I guess I'm going to send my Olaf out to get some lore. So I say, hey, opponent, I'm going to send Olaf out to get lore. Is that okay? And your opponent's going to look, and they have an Olaf in play. But they can't use their Olaf because their Olaf has summoning sickness. It is not able to challenge or do anything. Not until the start of their next turn. So they're like, well, I can't do anything. So since I went first, I'm the first person to be able to get lore. So I put him in here. I have no other effects. At the end of my turn, you know, or at the end of the lore phase, I check and I say, okay, I have 1 lore. I will get my 1 lore from him. He's going to come back to my field, but he's going to stay exerted, which is important. He's going to stay exerted. I'm going to get my 1 lore, whatever that will look like, and I put it in my collection. I pass the turn. My opponent's going to play similar setup. All right, they have this stuff too. So they have an Olaf and they have an Aladdin. Now, they have a choice. I have, so they just played this card. So they're going to have, you know, an active Olaf right here. I have a tapped, exerted Olaf like this on my side of the field. They could, if they wanted to, send their Olaf out to get 1 lore, or they could use their Olaf to challenge my Olaf if they wanted to, put some damage on that. But we could say for better purposes, let's say that instead of Olaf, let's say that my opponent has a Captain Hook. So what they'll do is they could be like, okay, well, your Olaf is exerted. I'm going to challenge your Olaf with my Captain Hook. My Captain Hook then is not going to be getting lore this turn because I have to exert it for either getting lore or for challenging. And for this turn, I'm going to choose challenging. So I will challenge your Captain Hook, or your Olaf with my Captain Hook. Well, nothing I can do about it. So, you know, my Olaf is going to be banished. Captain Hook's going to remain, but my opponent's not going to be able to get any lore. So then on my next turn, I'm only going to have my Aladdin in play. So I'll draw my card. You know, maybe I'll play another resource. I have 3 here. And maybe I'll play this guy. So now I have my Aladdin. My opponent has a tapped Captain Hook that I could probably take out. And then my opponent also has an Aladdin of their own. So for this purposes, I think taking out my opponent's tapped Captain Hook might be, you know, kind of beneficial, because I can essentially do a 2-for-1 trade. Because if I put this character in my lore zone to get lore, it's going to be tapped. Captain Hook's just going to take it out, and my opponent's still going to have a character. But if I use my character, take out their Captain Hook, I'd have still 1 health left on this. And then I could be able to take out my opponent's Aladdin on my following turn if they send it out to get lore. And this would finally be defeated. But I would have taken out 2 characters with only this 1. And I would still have this in turn, plus whatever I draw and stuff. So just to recap, I believe, for 1, you collect your lore at the end of your turn. So I'm going to send a character out to get lore. My opponent, you know, I give my opponent a chance to interact or whatever. And I think that's what happens. Like, do you want to play any effects? Is there anything you want to do? Because maybe my opponent says, hey, I'm going to exert my Elsa, and then I will exert your character going out to get lore. So that way your character is exerted and not getting lore. And then on my next turn, I might be able to challenge that character because it's exerted. Another idea, a little thing I have too, is I wonder if I have a character on my side of the field that does not have summoning sickness. Or even if, you know, that doesn't have summoning sickness, and my opponent says, hey, I'm going to send this character out to get lore. I wonder if I can be like, okay, well, in response, I'm going to challenge your character with mine. I don't think so. I think that's too much interaction. I don't think that's too much interaction for, say, most people watching, right? A lot of us come from trading card game backgrounds, but we're all older. We have to remember that this game is designed and targeted towards a younger audience. So that's why I think that you're going to be able to do your stuff on your turn with minimal interaction from your opponent. Your opponent is only going to be able to interact with your stuff if they have, say, action cards or cards like Elsa, or maybe there's going to be other cards too that, you know, that allow them to do that. But I think it'll be mostly on characters, and then also mostly on action cards, because it would be really cool if maybe I have a high health character, you know, like I was like, oh, okay, I'm gonna, you know, send my character out here to get lore or something, and my opponent does something, I can, no, that's not gonna make sense. That doesn't make sense. I have it backwards, but Yeah, I was thinking of the healing glow. You play healing. Oh, you could play healing glow. Yeah, so I could play it's not my turn, right? It's not my turn, and my opponent says, okay, I'm gonna challenge your character here that has all the damage, has been damaged, and I'm gonna take him out. And you're like, well, I'm gonna play my healing glow. It's not my turn, but I have the one resource available. I will healing glow to heal this for 2, and now my character will not be defeated or banished because of the damage, and I'll be able to use them on my next turn. So that's what I think happens. I think it makes the most sense. I think you play your characters, you get your own turn. So on my turn, I'll be like, okay, I'm gonna send this character to get lore. And if there's no interaction, the character will come back, you know, at the end of the turn, and I get my lore. Mulan is the biggest reason why I think this is real. I did think you collected lore at the beginning of your turn. That would give your opponent a chance to interact. But Mulan says that your characters get an extra lore that turn. So it's just going to disappear. So I think you would send a couple characters out to get lore, okay? And then you would take your Mulan right here. Your Mulan says, okay, I'm going to challenge one of my, my opponent's characters, hopefully banish it. And now, my other characters here are going to go up 1 lore. And I think that's the idea of that. If it was at the beginning of your turn, then Mulan doesn't make sense because you're going to lose those lore counters and they're not going to be tracked at the beginning of your turn. So, and another reason why I think this is possible and probably how you play is for Hades. And the reason why is Hades has a ton of health. Hades has 7 health. He is meant to go, and get lore and be exerted like all the time. You want to be able to use him several times in order to get as much resources from him as possible. So, cards like Healing Glow might actually be pretty good in a Hades deck just for keeping Hades alive longer. And I do like my idea of using Stitch with Hades. I talked about this in another video, but Stitch and Hades and Amber, or not Amber, Stitch and Hades and Healing Glow, which are all Amber, they all fit together right now. You use your Stitch, have it in play. It can just sit here if you want it, but it doesn't have to. Stitch does have 5 defense. He can get lore a couple times before he gets defeated. But you have your Stitch, and your Stitch will sit here, and then you play all these low-cost characters, and every time you put one in play, you could just draw a card, and that gives you access to, say, more villains. Because if I'm playing with a Hades, we'll say this is Hades, Hades doesn't care if these characters are exerted, or if they're in the lore zone, or if they're challenging, or whatever. Hades only cares if they're in play. So I could just load up my board with these guys, and then use Hades. Now, I think it is probably more beneficial. You get more if you also send these guys to get lore. But, and another thing too is why these guys are going to be exerted after they go get lore is so your opponent on their turn now has a chance to interact with your exerted characters. Because if these were, if I went and got lore and then just brought them back, then my opponent doesn't really have any chance of, say, interaction. You could argue, well, I can use my characters on your turn and I'll challenge you, but that's a lot of back and forth, and I think that'd be too much for a younger audience. So I think having cards stay like stationary on the side of the field, and then a younger player would be able just to look at this and think, okay, here's what I need to do with my cards to fight these cards. And for all intents and purposes, these cards aren't going to be moving or doing anything different. They'll just be here. My opponent might be able to play a card or two, or maybe they have a Tinkerbell that they could exert to draw a card. But that's something that's simple. It's right here on the card. That's like the only thing they're going to do. It's not going to be like, okay, well, I'm going to use this card, and since you're sending that guy on a quest, I'm going to use this. He's going to fight him, and then I'm going to use this card, and this card's going to fight him. That could be. I'm not saying it's not a possibility. I just think it's a little too much, and I like the idea of back and forth turns. And that way you do earn lore. You'll at the very least be able to earn lore on your turn. So if you're behind and your opponent's up by a lot, it could be possible that you're like, okay, well, on my turn, I'm going to, you know, do this and play this. Now, I just thought of, if we have to reach a certain lore condition to win, you could just put enough characters in your lore zone to gather the lore needed to win, and if your opponent isn't able to do anything about it, then you just win, you know. So maybe then having characters in play in order to challenge at the time they go, that, you know, that would make sense. But I think that if you're playing and, you know, I go out and I get lore with all these characters, and say I gather like 5-6 lore, maybe 7 lore, I have a huge turn. But now my characters are all exerted. Like, say I only need like 3 more lore to win. I'm at like 17 out of 20. My opponent, though, has a chance still to stop me, because I can't play a character and send them out to get a quest right away, as far as we know. I can put a character down and challenge right away, and that's something we've seen. We've seen that keyword. So it's called rush. So I could be like, oh, you know what? I'm going to play this character. I will tap, you know, I will exert my White Rabbit's Pocket Watch to give this one haste or rush, and I'm going to fight, you know, your character is making all the lore, and then I'm going to use my other characters, and we're going to battle, and I'm going to wipe out your team. You know, I only have like 1 guy left, but I haven't lost, because on your opponent's turn, they can only play a character, but they can't get lore, because that character is going to have a summoning sickness, so you're going to have a chance to come back. So that's what I think happens there. And I don't think there's going to be a keyword that has a character gather lore right away. If it does, I think that the character would have really weak stats. I'm still on the train that I think we're going to see like a really low cost character. It's going to have like 1 attack or 1 resource, 1 attack, 1 defense. It's going to have evasive, and it's just going to gather lore every turn. And evasive is going to be pretty good, because evasive can't be challenged. So you're just going to be like, okay, I gather lore, and then it's going to be exerted on your turn. On my opponent's turn, they can't do anything. But also, the reason why they stay exerted, another reason, is Robin Hood. Robin Hood gains evasive on your turn. Why would he need evasive? So he can challenge other evasive characters like Mickey Mouse, or anybody else that might have evasive. Oh, the new Tigger, actually, as I'm recording this, the new Tigger actually was just released. And the new Tigger has evasive as well. He's a 6 cost 4/4. He's okay. He's just okay. Like, I mean, actually, he might be a little better than okay. 6 cost 4/4. It's gonna be hard to take down. Hard to challenge. You know, with the evasive, that might not be too bad. If Mickey Mouse is like a really good powerhouse, doesn't matter. But there's he's another evasive character. So I know I've been rambling. I don't really have a script. I'm just really excited. I think I figured this out, and I think that's how you're gonna win. There's gonna be a lot of back and forth. I send my characters out to get lore. They return exerted. You can only challenge exerted characters. Also, cards like Gontu. Gontu says that your characters with cost 2 or less can't challenge your characters. So if you're up against some sort of tempo deck, if you kind of outvalue them, if you're able to play, say, your bigger creatures that reward more lore, or your bigger characters, your opponent's tempo cards can't challenge your characters, so they'll just sit on the field, and you're just gonna sit here and keep getting more and more lore. Gontu himself can gather lore as well. He doesn't need to just sit there on the field. He can get lore in addition to your other team. So I think I got it. You send your people out, get some lore. They come back exerted. On my opponent's turn, they can use their characters to challenge exerted characters if they don't have summoning sickness, or they can get some lore themselves, but when they do, they come back exerted. So then on my turn, I could be like, oh, you know what? That card is troublesome. I'm going to challenge that card and get rid of it. And if my opponent isn't able to play a creature, I could be like, oh, well, then on my next turn, I'll play another creature and I'll get some lore, and you could just be ahead. So the only thing is the resource system. And I have 2 colors here because I thought that maybe, you could play a card down like this. But the problem is, you know, and it's like, oh, in order to play this card, which is a 2-cost red, so in Duel Masters, I needed to play this. Okay, to play these, it's good to see this in person. So I use this as one resource, one red resource. I put that down. I can play this card because it's red and it needs one resource. Here is one red resource. I can play that card. Let's say I wanted to play Mini Titan Jet, and if my thing looked like this, 2 greens, I can't play this card because Jet, whatever. I think I called her Jet. She needs 2 red ones. Or, I'm sorry, she needs at least 1 red. She is a red card who needs 1 red resource. I have no red resource. But, if I had my resource system like this, I do have 1 red resource. So I'd pay 1 red resource plus 1 of anything else, and I can play her. Now, I like this idea a lot. And you're also able to just like take cards from the top of your deck and just put them down as resource. That was the thing you could do. The issue is with Disney Lorcana, there's no symbols on the card that indicate that it can be used for resource like this. Now the back of the card, you know, as I mentioned earlier, does have that design on it, but if you have that card sleeved, you're not going to see it. However, I think you could still put it down here. But if that's the case, then it doesn't matter what the color is of your card. You could just play it for any reason, which is totally fine. I'm cool with that, but it's like, what does the flourish mean? You know, what does it mean? Why do some have flourishes and some don't? The Lorcana twins think it might be something with uniqueness, and I like that idea, but it's weird because I like it for, say, Hades. I get why you'd probably only want 1 Hades in play. But it's like, why can't I play 2 Dragonfires if I'm behind? I should be able to drop 2 Dragonfires to stop my opponent from doing stuff. And also, if it's unique, if it's per turn, couldn't I just Dragonfire on my opponent's turn? And then on my turn, I can just Dragonfire anyway? Now, I get why I can't double Dragonfire. So, you know, I'll destroy, you know, banish their characters so they can't gather lore. But... and then there's also, what was the other card? The Magic Mirror. That one, like, it's like, why can't I have multiple, you know, a couple of Magic Mirrors in play? And if I want to pay 8 resources to draw 2 cards, I should be allowed to do that. I don't see that being like a huge deal. I get Hades, 100% get why maybe you wouldn't want to have more than 1 Hades in play, because that could get out of hand quickly. Especially if you had a board of other villains, you could just put 2 Hades, like just have them sit in the lore zone every turn and just have like a small gathering. You know, these are all villains. This is 5 villains plus, you know, these 2, that's 6 and 7, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 6 and 7, they each have 1 lore, but then they get 1 extra lore for each villain, right? So this one, or no, they both have, this one would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Plus it's, oh, so it'll be able to be, yeah, they'll be able to be 14. I don't know what I'm thinking. So, I mean, this is 24 lore. Or, I mean, I'm sorry, 14 lore out of 20. So, I get why you'd only want 1 Hades. So, I don't know. I'm not sure. It makes sense. I can see why it makes sense. It's just, it would feel like, it would feel bad. I should be able to play, you know, I should be able to double Dragonfire if I wanted to. But, anyway, that's about it. I'm going to just go ahead and wrap this up. So, I think I figured it out. I did a little demonstration. I think that's what you do, and I think it makes perfect sense with all the cards we've seen so far. You know, just as the briefest recap, I play my resource, and then I play my character. On my Summoning Sickness, can't do anything. On my next turn, unexert that, play another resource. Now I'm going to send this character to get lore. My opponent has no interaction. I get my 1 lore and my turn. My opponent decides to challenge this character because it's exerted with their character, but by doing so, they are unable to get lore with that character because they are exerting it. So they choose to banish my character instead of getting lore. But on their turn, if their character survives, they can untap it, unexert it, and they can send it to get lore if they want. But then it's tapped, so then maybe I have a character exerted. Sorry, it's the habit. I can challenge it, so it's a lot of back and forth, and I like that. I think it's a lot of back and forth. you're going to want to establish a board presence that makes it difficult for opponent to remove. I think it's going to be beneficial to have some characters who are going to be really good at just gathering lore, and other characters who are good at challenging. So like Cruella de Vil would be really good at just gathering lore, because your opponent, you know, isn't going to want to necessarily banish her because they're going to lose a character, and as we see, that's going to be a big tempo loss. So she might get one lore every turn, but you know, your opponent's not going to deal with it. And you have other cards, you know, say like Captain Hook. I blanked out for a sec. Captain Hook, whose sole purpose might be just to defeat your opponent's characters who have gone out to lore. I mean, a Captain Hook on your turn can take out an Olaf, and it can take out a Captain Hook as well. So by itself, that is a 2-for-1 exchange. That is really good. It can take out 2 Captain Hooks, 2 Olafs, you know, whatever. It can also take out 2 bigger creatures as well. And for the temple, because it only costs 1 and it will survive, you could take out an opposing Cruella de Vil, because you'll live with the 1 hit point, and if this is the only character you have, it'll go back to your hand. But your opponent lost a character. They are minus a character now. But you could just replay your Captain Hook for only 1 resource, and then maybe play some other stuff later on. So I think that an early game hook, I think, is going to be very menacing. So you can just leave it like, hey, if you send something out to get lore, I'm taking it out. Just want to let you know. And I like this idea because you are going to be able to get lore on your turn without some interaction from your opponent, like instant speed, you know, something that it can do like with Elsa or whatever. I like that. It's like, okay, on my turn, I'm able to do most of what I want to do, and I'm able to play my cards. I'm going to get my lore. And your opponent's like, okay, what am I going to do on my turn? Do I want to get lore, or do I want to fight the characters my opponent has that got lore? So a little bit of back and forth, but I like it. I like it a lot. I was real excited, and I wanted to make this video today. Might be a little scuffed, but it's out there. So, all right, that's going to be about it for today. Let me know if you agree with me, if you think maybe something might be slightly different, if you think maybe something should be done a different way, but I'm feeling pretty good. And if that's how the game's played, I'm actually pretty excited. I think that's going to be really fun. It's simple, but also not simple. And you can see why cards like, you know, Aurora would be like pretty good, giving all your characters ward, which means they can only be banished through challenging. So, I mean, Aurora has 5 health. She's not going to go anywhere for a bit. So yeah, thanks for stopping in. Again, it's a little scuffed. I just kind of made this video, no script or anything. I just wanted to put it out there, and you know, I still have all my dual master cards, well, at least the commons and uncommons. This is a really good game. I actually was playing with I always talk about it, I have some bleach cards here too, and I was using these, but it didn't make as much sense, because dual masters at least is might be a little bit like Disney Lorcana, but it is what it is. So hey, stop thanks for stopping by. I appreciate it. I love rambling. I love making these videos. It's just really fun. And I just have a kick, and I love interacting, you know, with people. I love sharing my thoughts. And you know, I mentioned it before, but I don't really have a lot of people right now, you know, in person who I can like share this stuff with. So I just like putting it out on the internet, just kind of ramble, and just get my thoughts out there. So alright, well, I think that's enough talking for one day. I'm gonna go edit this video. Thanks for watching. Be safe out there. Make good decisions. And I will see you in the next one. Okay, bye.